I pulled into the driveway, my mind still buzzing from a hectic day of parent-teacher conferences. As I fumbled for my house keys, I noticed an unfamiliar car parked next to Lucas's SUV. Strange. My husband hadn't mentioned we'd be having company. The moment I stepped inside, I knew something was off. The air felt thick with tension, and hushed voices drifted from the kitchen. I rounded the corner, my heart skipping a beat when I saw Emily, my sister-in-law, perched on a bar stool at our kitchen island. "Sarah!" Lucas exclaimed, his voice unnaturally high. "You're home early." I glanced at the clock on the microwave. "It's 6:30, same as always." My eyes darted between Lucas and Emily, taking in their guilty expressions. "What's going on?" Emily slid off the stool, smoothing her designer jeans. "Hey, sis, surprise!" Her attempt at cheerfulness fell flat. "Emily's going through a rough patch," Lucas explained, not quite meeting my eyes. "Her marriage, well, it's over." I blinked, processing this information. "I'm sorry to hear that, Emily. But why are you here?" Lucas cleared his throat. "I told her she could stay with us for a while, just until she gets back on her feet." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. "You what?" I turned to Emily. "Where are your things?" She gestured vaguely upstairs. "Guest room. Lucas helped me move in this afternoon." I gripped the edge of the counter, steadying myself. "And when exactly were you planning to tell me about this, Lucas?" He had the decency to look ashamed. "I was going to tell you tonight. I didn't want to bother you at work." "Bother me?" I laughed, the sound harsh even to my own ears. "You invited your sister to live with us without even asking me, and you didn't want to bother me?" Emily stepped forward, her perfectly manicured hand reaching out. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. I know this is a shock, but I didn't have anywhere else to go." I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm of emotions swirling inside me. "Emily, can you give us a minute? I need to talk to my husband, alone." She nodded, casting a glance at Lucas before retreating upstairs. The moment we heard the guest room door close, I rounded on Lucas. "What were you thinking?" I hissed. "We can't just take in a house guest indefinitely, especially not your sister." Lucas ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit I'd seen countless times in our 15 years of marriage. "She's family, Sarah." "What was I supposed to do, turn her away?" "You were supposed to talk to me first," I countered. "We're supposed to be partners, remember?" He sighed, leaning against the counter. "You're right, I should have discussed it with you. But Emily was desperate, and I couldn't just—" A muffled thud from upstairs cut him off. We both looked up, then back at each other. Something in Lucas's expression made my stomach churn. "There's more, isn't there?" I asked, dreading the answer. Lucas nodded slowly. "Emily's not just going through a divorce. She's in some financial trouble. Serious trouble." I closed my eyes, feeling the beginnings of a headache. "How serious?" "She might lose everything," Lucas admitted. "The house, her car, everything." I opened my eyes, studying my husband's face. There was something there, something he wasn't telling me. But before I could press further, Emily appeared in the doorway, her eyes red-rimmed. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice breaking. "I'll go. I never meant to cause problems between you two." Lucas moved toward her, his hand outstretched. "No, Emily, you don't have to." I watched as their fingers brushed, saw the look that passed between them. In that moment, I knew. This wasn't just about helping family. This was something much, much worse. My world tilted on its axis as the realization hit me. My husband and my sister-in-law. How long had this been going on, and what was I going to do now? I barely slept that night, tossing and turning as my mind raced with questions. By morning, I was exhausted and raw, but determined to get answers. I found Lucas in the kitchen, nursing a cup of coffee. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Lucas nodded, his eyes bloodshot. "I know. Sarah, I'm so sorry about yesterday. I should have—" I held up a hand, cutting him off. "I don't want apologies. I want the truth. All of it." He sighed, shoulders slumping. "Emily's not just broke, she's in debt. Big time. Her ex-husband left her with nothing but a mountain of bills." "And that's our problem because—" I asked, fighting to keep my tone even. "She's family," Lucas insisted. "We can't just abandon her." I leaned against the counter, studying my husband's face. "There's more to it than that, isn't there? I saw the way you looked at her yesterday." Lucas flinched, guilt flashing across his features. "It's not what you think. Emily and we've always been close, but I swear, Nothing's happened between us. Yet, I added, the word bitter on my tongue. Before Lucas could respond, Emily appeared in the doorway, looking far too put together for someone supposedly in crisis. "Good morning," she chirped, her smile faltering as she sensed the tension. I turned to face her, my patience wearing thin. "Emily, we need to talk about your living situation." Her eyes widened, darting to Lucas. "Oh, I thought." "Lucas said it was okay for me to stay." "Lucas doesn't make unilateral decisions for this household," I said firmly. "How long exactly are you planning to impose on us?" Emily's facade cracked, tears welling in her eyes. "I'm sorry, Sarah. I know this is an inconvenience. I didn't know where else to go." I felt a twinge of sympathy, quickly squashed by suspicion. "And of all the people you know, my husband was your only option?" "Sarah," Lucas warned, but I ignored him. Emily wiped at her eyes, her voice trembling. "Lucas has always been there for me. He understands me in a way no one else does." The implication hung heavy in the air. I turned to Lucas, searching his face for any sign of denial. Finding none, I felt something inside me harden. "I think it's time you left, Emily," I said, my voice cold. "Today." Emily's tears dried up instantly, her expression shifting to one of determination. "No," she said, moving to stand beside Lucas. "I'm not going anywhere." I blinked, taken aback by her sudden change in demeanor. "Excuse me?" She lifted her chin defiantly. "You heard me. Lucas invited me to stay, and I'm staying. You can't kick me out of my brother's house." I looked to Lucas, expecting him to back me up, but he remained silent, his gaze fixed on the floor. The betrayal stung like a physical blow. "Is that how you feel, Lucas?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He finally met my eyes, his expression pained. "Sarah, please, we can work this out. Emily needs our help, and I—" "You what?" I pressed, anger rising in my chest. "You care more about her needs than our marriage?" Emily stepped forward, her hand brushing Lucas's arm. The casual intimacy of the gesture made my stomach churn. "Face it, Sarah," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Lucas and I have a connection you could never understand. It's time to accept that and move on." I stared at her, shock giving way to a cold, clear rage. In that moment, I saw Emily for who she truly was. Not a desperate sister-in-law in need, but a manipulative snake who had slithered her way into my home and my marriage. I turned to Lucas, my decision made. If she stays, I go. It's that simple. The silence that followed was deafening. I watched emotions play across Lucas's face. Guilt, confusion, and something that looked terrifyingly like relief. When he finally spoke, his words shattered what was left of my world. Maybe that would be for the best. As Emily's triumphant smile bloomed behind him, I realized with sickening clarity that this was far from over. The battle for my marriage and my dignity had only just begun. I spent the next few days in a daze, going through the motions at work while my personal life crumbled around me. The house felt like a war zone, with Emily's presence a constant reminder of my failing marriage. I'd taken to sleeping in the guest room, unable to bear lying next to Lucas, knowing his heart was elsewhere. One evening I came home to find Emily alone in the living room, flipping through a magazine as if she owned the place. My blood boiled at the sight. "Where's Lucas?" I asked, my voice clipped. Emily looked up, a smirk playing at her lips. "Working late, again." She set the magazine aside, fixing me with a pitying look. "You know, Sarah, we should talk." I crossed my arms, bracing myself. "About what?" "Lucas," she said simply. "He's been different lately, distant. Haven't you noticed?" Of course I'd noticed. The man I'd married seemed to be slipping away, replaced by a stranger who looked at Emily with longing in his eyes. But I wasn't about to admit that to her. "My marriage is none of your business," I snapped. Emily sighed, playing the role of concerned sister-in-law to perfection. "I'm just worried about him, about both of you. Lucas needs someone who understands him, who can give him what he needs." The implication hung heavy in the air. I felt my nails digging into my palms as I fought to keep my composure. "And I suppose you think that's you?" I asked, my voice dangerously low. Emily stood, moving closer. "I'm not trying to hurt you, Sarah, but you have to face facts. Lucas and I, we have a connection, a history. Maybe it's time to stop fighting the inevitable." Something inside me snapped. Before I knew what I was doing, my hand connected with Emily's cheek. The sharp crack echoing through the room. Emily stumbled back, shock written across her face. You hit me. Get out." I seethed, trembling with rage. "Get out of my house now!" The front door opened and Lucas walked in, freezing at the scene before him. "What the hell is going on?" Emily burst into tears, running to Lucas and burying her face in his chest. "She hit me. I was just trying to talk to her, and she attacked me." Lucas's arms went around Emily instinctively, and I felt my heart shatter all over again. He looked at me, his expression a mix of disappointment and anger. "Sarah, how could you?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. I stared at them, the picture of betrayal complete. "How could I? How could you, Lucas? How long has this been going on? How long have you been planning to leave me for her?" Lucas's eyes widened, guilt flashing across his face before he schooled his features. "It's not like that. Emily needs us. I'm just trying to help her." "By destroying our marriage?" I countered, my voice breaking. Emily pulled away from Lucas, wiping her crocodile tears. "I told you, Sarah, you're only pushing him away. Lucas deserves someone who truly understands him." I watched as Lucas's hand found Emily's, their fingers intertwining. The gesture, so small yet so intimate, was the final nail in the coffin of my marriage. "I want a divorce," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. Lucas flinched, but I saw the relief in his eyes. "Sarah, please. We can work this out. We just need time." "Time for what?" I interrupted. "Time for you to keep lying to me? Time for her to completely take my place?" I shook my head, a bitter laugh escaping me. "No, I'm done. You two deserve each other." I turned and walked out of the room, my head held high despite the tears threatening to fall. As I climbed the stairs, I heard Emily's voice, low and triumphant. "It's for the best, Lucas. Now we can finally be together." In that moment, I knew. This wasn't just about saving my marriage anymore. This was war, and I was going to fight with everything I had. The next morning, I woke with a sense of purpose. If Lucas wanted a divorce, I'd make sure I was prepared. While he was at work, I decided to search his home office for any financial documents we might need. As I rifled through his desk drawers, my hand brushed against a thick manila envelope. My heart stopped when I pulled it out and saw the words "divorce papers" scrawled across the top in Lucas's handwriting. With trembling fingers, I opened the envelope. The papers inside were pristine, unmarked, except for Lucas's signature on the last page. He'd already signed them. He was just waiting to serve me. I sank into his chair, my world spinning. How long had he been planning this? How long had I been living a lie? A noise from the doorway startled me. I looked up to see Emily leaning against the frame, a triumphant smirk on her face. "Well, well," she said, sauntering into the room. "Looks like the cat's out of the bag." I clutched the papers to my chest. "You knew about this?" Emily laughed, the sound grating on my nerves. "Of course I knew. Who do you think helped Lucas draft them?" The betrayal cut deep, but I refused to let her see me cry. "Why?" I demanded. "Why are you doing this to me?" Her smile faded, replaced by a look of cold determination. "Because I deserve this, Sarah. I deserve Lucas, this house, this life, and you. You're just in the way." Before I could respond, we heard the front door open. Lucas's voice called out, "I'm home early. Sarah? Emily?" Emily's eyes glittered with malice. "Showtime," she whispered, then raised her voice. "We're in your office, Lucas. Sarah's found something interesting." Lucas appeared in the doorway, his face paling when he saw the papers in my hands. "Sarah, I can explain." "Explain what?" I interrupted, my voice surprisingly steady. "How you've been planning to divorce me behind my back? How you've been conspiring with your sister to kick me out of my own home?" Lucas had the decency to look ashamed, but Emily just rolled her eyes. "Oh, please, don't act so surprised. You must have known this was coming." I stood facing them both. "Actually, I didn't. I thought we had a marriage worth fighting for. I guess I was wrong." Lucas stepped forward, his hand outstretched. "Sarah, please, it's not what you think. I thought it would be easier this way." "Easier?" I laughed bitterly. "For who? You and your mistress here?" Emily bristled. "Watch it, Sarah. Remember whose house you're in." Something inside me snapped. "My house," I snarled. "My marriage, my life. And I'll be damned if I let you two take it from me without a fight." Lucas's expression hardened. "There's nothing to fight for, Sarah. It's over. Just sign the papers and we can all move on." I looked between them, my husband of 15 years and the woman who'd stolen him away. In that moment I made a decision. "You want me to sign?" I asked, my voice dangerously low. "Fine. I'll sign, but not before I get what's rightfully mine." I turned and strode out of the office, the divorce papers clutched in my hand. Behind me, I heard Emily's triumphant laugh and Lucas's worried voice asking what I meant. As I climbed the stairs to pack my things, a plan began to form in my mind. They thought they'd won, but they had no idea what I was capable of. This wasn't just about saving my marriage anymore. This was about justice, retribution, and making sure Emily and Lucas paid for every ounce of pain they'd caused me. The war had begun, and I intended to emerge victorious. I spent the next few days in a haze of anger and determination, meticulously planning my next move. I'd contacted a divorce lawyer, gathered financial documents, and started looking for a new place to live. But I wasn't about to let Lucas and Emily off easy. On a rainy Tuesday morning, I sat at the kitchen table, divorce papers spread out before me. My hand hovered over the signature line, pen poised. This was it. The moment that would change everything. The front door opened, and Lucas walked in, shaking water from his umbrella. He froze when he saw me. "Sarah," he said cautiously, "what are you doing?" I looked up, meeting his gaze steadily. "What does it look like? I'm giving you what you want." His eyes widened as he realized what I meant. You're signing the papers?" I nodded, turning back to the documents. With a deep breath, I signed my name on each marked line, feeling a piece of my heart break with every stroke of the pen. Lucas approached slowly, as if afraid I might lash out. I didn't think you'd do it so quickly." I laughed bitterly. "What did you expect, Lucas? That I'd beg you to stay? Fight for a man who clearly doesn't want me?" He had the decency to look ashamed. "Sarah, I never meant to hurt you. It's just Emily and I." "Save it," I interrupted, standing up. "I don't want to hear your excuses, but there's something you should know." I pulled out another set of papers from my bag, sliding them across the table. Lucas picked them up, his brow furrowing as he read. "What is this?" he asked, confusion evident in his voice. "That," I said, a hint of triumph in my tone, "is a petition to sell the house. Our house. The one you so generously offered to your sister." Lucas's face paled. "You can't do this. Emily needs to find her own place to live," I snapped. "This house is half mine, and I'm not about to let you two play happy families in the home we built together." Just then, Emily waltzed in, her smug smile faltering when she saw the tension in the room. "What's going on?" I turned to her, a cold smile on my face. "Oh, just finalizing some details of the divorce. By the way, you might want to start house hunting. This place will be on the market by the end of the week." Emily's eyes widened in panic. She turned to Lucas. "You can't let her do this. Where will I go?" Lucas looked between us, clearly torn. "Sarah, please, can't we discuss this?" I shook my head, gathering up the papers. "There's nothing to discuss. The divorce is final, and the house will be sold. You two can figure out your living arrangements on your own." As I moved to leave, Emily grabbed my arm. "You vindictive bitch," she hissed. "You won't get away with this." I yanked my arm free, fixing her with a steely glare. "Watch me." With that, I walked out of the kitchen, head held high. As I reached the front door, I heard Lucas call out, "Sarah, wait! Where will you go?" I paused, hand on the doorknob. Without turning around, I replied, "Anywhere but here." As I stepped out into the rain, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The pain was still there, raw and throbbing, but alongside it was something new. Hope, determination, a fierce desire to reclaim my life and build something better. I got into my car, taking one last look at the house that had been my home for so many years. It was time to say goodbye to the old Sarah, the one who had let herself be betrayed and pushed aside. From now on, I was going to put myself first. As I drove away, I made a silent vow. This wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning of a new chapter, one where I would be the author of my own happiness. The bustling streets of Chicago were a far cry from the quiet suburbs I'd left behind. 3 months had passed since I'd signed those divorce papers, and I was determined to make a fresh start. I'd found a small apartment and started building a clientele as a private tutor, drawing on my years of teaching experience. On a crisp autumn morning, I sat in a quaint coffee shop, waiting for my first student of the day. As I sipped my latte, my phone buzzed with a text from Lucas. "Sarah, we need to talk. It's about the house." My stomach churned. I'd been avoiding his calls, letting my lawyer handle the details of the sale, but I knew I couldn't run forever. "What about it?" I typed back, my fingers trembling slightly. His response came quickly. "Emily's pregnant." We can't move now. Please reconsider selling." The words hit me like a physical blow. Pregnant. Emily was pregnant with Lucas's child. The life I'd once dreamed of having with him was now hers. I barely noticed when my student, a bright-eyed teenager named Lily, slid into the seat across from me. "Mrs. Johnson, are you okay?" she asked, concern etched on her young face. I forced a smile, pushing down the turmoil inside me. "I'm fine, Lily. Let's get started on those algebra equations, shall we?" As we worked through the problems, my mind raced. I'd come so far, built a new life for myself, but hearing about Emily's pregnancy had reopened wounds I thought had healed. After Lily left, I found myself wandering the streets, lost in thought. My phone rang. It was my lawyer. "Sarah, I've got some news about the house sale," he said, his voice grave. "There's been a complication." My heart sank. "What kind of complication?" "Lucas is contesting the sale. He's claiming you signed the divorce papers under duress and that the house should remain in his possession." I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. Everything I'd worked for, the clean break I'd fought so hard to achieve, was suddenly in jeopardy. "He can't do that," I said, my voice rising. "We both signed those papers willingly." "I know, Sarah, but he's got a good lawyer, and with Emily's pregnancy, they're painting a sympathetic picture. We need to prepare for a fight." As I hung up, I noticed I'd wandered into a small park. I sank onto a bench, feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders. Just when I thought I was moving forward, the past was dragging me back. A group of children ran by, their laughter echoing through the park. I watched them, remembering the family I'd once hoped to have with Lucas. Now he was starting that family with Emily. Anger bubbled up inside me, replacing the initial shock. How dare they try to take away the one thing I had left? The house sale was my ticket to a truly fresh start, a way to cut all ties with my old life. I pulled out my phone, my fingers flying over the keys as I typed a message to Lucas. "You want a fight? You've got one. I won't let you and Emily take anything else from me." As I hit send, a strange calm washed over me. This was it, the final battle. Everything I'd been through, every tear I'd shed, and every sleepless night had led to this moment. I stood up, squaring my shoulders. I'd rebuilt my life once. I could do it again. But this time, I wouldn't just survive. I would thrive. As I walked out of the park, my resolve hardened. Lucas and Emily thought they could bully me into submission, but they had no idea who they were dealing with. The old Sarah might have backed down, might have given in to keep the peace. But not anymore. This time, I was ready to fight with everything I had. The weeks flew by in a whirlwind of tutoring sessions and legal meetings. My days were filled with helping students unlock their potential, while my nights were consumed by strategizing with my lawyer. The fight for the house had become more than just a battle over property. It was a fight for my dignity, my future. One crisp autumn evening, I stood before a small gathering at the local community center. I'd been invited to speak about adult education and second chances. As I looked out at the sea of faces, many of them women my age or older, I felt a surge of strength. "Life doesn't always go as planned," I began, my voice steady. "Sometimes the path we thought we'd follow crumbles beneath our feet. But that doesn't mean we're lost. It means we have the opportunity to forge a new path." As I spoke, I saw heads nodding, eyes glistening with unshed tears. These women understood loss, betrayal, the struggle to reinvent oneself. I was one of them now. After the talk, a woman approached me, her gray hair neatly coiffed. "Thank you," she said, clasping my hand. "Your words, they gave me hope. I've been struggling since my divorce, but hearing your story makes me believe I can start over, too." Her words warmed my heart, but before I could respond, my phone buzzed insistently. It was my lawyer. "Sarah, we've got a problem," he said, his voice tense. "Lucas's lawyer has filed a motion claiming you abandoned the property. They're trying to void the sale agreement entirely." My blood ran cold. "That's ridiculous. I left because he was having an affair with my sister-in-law." "I know, Sarah, but they're playing dirty. We need to counter this fast." As I hung up, I felt the walls closing in. Everything I'd worked for, the new life I'd built, was teetering on the brink of collapse. If Lucas won, I'd lose not just the house, but the financial cushion I needed to truly start over. I looked up to see the gray-haired woman watching me, concern etched on her face. "Are you all right, dear?" In that moment, something inside me snapped. I was tired of being the victim, tired of Lucas and Emily controlling my life from afar. "No," I said, my voice stronger than I felt, "but I will be." I spent the next few days in a frenzy of activity. I gathered every scrap of evidence I could find, emails, text messages, anything that proved Lucas and Emily's affair. I reached out to old friends and colleagues, asking for character references. On the day of the court hearing, I stood outside the courthouse, my heart pounding. This was it, the moment that would decide my future. As I climbed the steps, I saw them. Lucas and Emily, hand in hand, her pregnancy now visible. The sight of them looking so smug and confident made my blood boil. Emily caught my eye, a triumphant smirk playing on her lips. "Ready to lose, Sarah?" she called out. I felt a surge of rage, so powerful it nearly took my breath away. But then I remembered the women at the community center, their faces full of hope and admiration. I thought of my students, working so hard to better themselves. I thought of the new Sarah I'd become, stronger, more resilient, unwilling to back down. I met Emily's gaze, my chin held high. "I've already won," I said, my voice steady, "because unlike you, I don't need to steal someone else's life to be happy." With that, I turned and walked into the courthouse, my head held high. Whatever happened in that courtroom, I knew one thing for certain. I was done being a victim. From this moment on, I was the author of my own story, and no one, not Lucas, not Emily, could take that away from me. As the courtroom doors loomed before me, I took a deep breath. This wasn't just about a house anymore. This was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, my future. And I was ready to fight with everything I had. 2 years had passed since the courtroom battle. I'd won the right to sell the house, using the proceeds to build a new life in Chicago. My tutoring business had flourished, and I'd even started a support group for women rebuilding their lives after divorce. I thought I'd left my old life behind for good. But fate had other plans. I found myself back in my hometown, visiting my ailing mother. As I walked down Main Street, memories flooding back with each step, I spotted a familiar face through a diner window. Lucas. My heart stuttered. He was waiting tables, looking haggard and worn. A far cry from the successful businessman he'd once been. Before I could duck away, his eyes met mine. Recognition flashed across his face, followed by a mix of shame and regret. Against my better judgment, I entered the diner. The bell above the door chimed, announcing my arrival. Lucas approached, coffee pot in hand, his steps hesitant. "Sarah," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know you were in town." I nodded, taking a seat at the counter. "Just visiting, Mom. How are you, Lucas?" He poured me a cup of coffee, his hands trembling slightly. "I've been better," he admitted. "Emily, she left, took the baby and moved back east." I felt a twinge of sympathy, quickly replaced by a sense of vindication. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, surprised to find I meant it. Lucas's eyes filled with tears. "I made a terrible mistake, Sarah. I threw away the best thing in my life for nothing." I sipped my coffee, letting his words hang in the air. The old Sarah might have comforted him, might have even considered taking him back. But I wasn't that woman anymore. "We all make choices, Lucas," I said finally. "We have to live with the consequences." He nodded, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "You look good, Sarah. Happy." I smiled, thinking of my new life, my new friends, the women I'd helped. "I am happy. It wasn't easy, but I've built a life I'm proud of." Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Lily, my first Chicago student, now heading off to college. "Got accepted to Northwestern. Couldn't have done it without you, Mrs. J. Thank you for everything." Warmth spread through my chest as I showed Lucas the message. "This is why I do what I do," I said. "Helping others rebuild their lives. It's given me purpose." Lucas's face crumpled. "I'm so sorry, Sarah, for everything. I wish I could go back and change it all." I stood, leaving money for the coffee on the counter. "We can't change the past, Lucas, but we can learn from it." As I turned to leave, Lucas called out, Could you ever forgive me?" I paused at the door, considering his question. The anger and hurt I'd carried for so long had faded, replaced by something else. Not love, not anymore, but understanding. We were both flawed, both human. "I forgave you a long time ago, Lucas," I said softly. "It was the only way I could move on." With that, I walked out of the diner and into the bright sunlight. As I made my way down the familiar streets of my hometown, I felt a profound sense of peace wash over me. The woman who had left this town broken and betrayed was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, wiser, more compassionate. I thought of the life I'd built in Chicago, the students I'd helped, the women in my support group who'd become like sisters. I thought of Lily, heading off to college, her future bright with possibility. And I thought of Lucas, a cautionary tale of what happens when you take love for granted. My phone buzzed again, another text, this time from the community center in Chicago. They wanted me to lead a workshop on rebuilding after divorce. I smiled, typing out a quick acceptance. As I reached my mother's house, I paused on the porch, looking back at the town that had shaped me. This place held memories both bitter and sweet, but it no longer defined me. My life, my true home, was waiting for me in Chicago. I took a deep breath, feeling the last vestiges of my old life fall away. The future stretched out before me, full of promise and possibility. For the first time in years, I felt truly, completely free. With a smile on my face and lightness in my heart, I opened the door to greet my mother. It was time to share my story of triumph, of resilience, of a woman who had lost everything only to find herself. And in that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that the best was yet to come.